Hi there and welcome. My name is Michael Amoruso. These are such trying times we're all operating under, but it doesn't mean we still can't learn a little bit. So I thank you all for joining us. From the bottom of our hearts at Amoruso and Amoruso, we hope that all of you, your loved ones, your friends, your colleagues, everyone you're associated with is staying safe and healthy through these times. It's interesting that during these trying times of the negotiation of our state budget, that some monumental changes have also occurred through this budget process when it comes to Medicaid home care services. So let me give you a little background of this in this quick 15 minutes. And I will follow this up with a series going forward, as well as more developments continue to occur in these lines and how they affect the services that we all deliver to our clients. So first of all, when the budget process first began, I'm sure you all heard that the governor reconvened the Medicaid design team. And the recommendations, all of the recommendations out of that committee, so far as it affected Medicaid home care, were actually incorporated in the initial draft of the governor's budget. So here are the few highlights that were in that proposal. First of all, there was the elimination of spousal refusal for home care. There was the imposition of a 5-year look back and transfer penalties to be on par with what nursing home rules are. Third, they wanted to lower the community spouse resource allowance. That's the amount of money a well spouse can retain as exempt resources, from the current range of 74,000 up to 126,000. That's that sliding scale, all the way down to approximately $25,000. And finally, there are dramatic changes made to, or proposed to be made, to the consumer-directed program. Well, after much lobbying, this is what the final budget bill provided for with regard to home care. Spousal refusal survives. The community spouse resource allowance survives. So what that left us with was the look back period for home care. Well, there was a lot of negotiation that occurred, and that was lowered from the proposed 5-year look back period to a 30-month look back period. That, in addition, included the transfer penalties that currently exist for nursing home applications. So you need to keep that in mind on a go-forward basis with regard to Medicaid home care. There were also changes made to the consumer-directed program. I will devote a whole separate learning session just on those changes to consumer-directed. Today, I want to cover this 2.5-year look-back period and the transfer penalties. So let's talk about what the prior law was so that you can understand this, okay? So under prior rules, I always told my clients, envision 2 separate train tracks, where on track 1, you have nursing home eligibility, and that contained a 5-year look-back period and transfer penalties if there were transfers of assets during that period of time. The second rail of that track was Medicaid home care eligibility. And previous to the current budget rule, there were no look-back periods or transfer penalties for Medicaid home care. Yes, there was a 3-month attestation of resources and income, but there was no look-back as defined under the nursing home track, and there were no transfer penalties. Come this current budget. So here's the effective date. Effective October 1st of 2020. Applications filed, that's the key, applications filed after that date. Applications filed after that date will be subject to the new rules. Applications filed prior to October 1st are still subject to the old rules. So now with the new rules, we are left with, instead of 2 railroad tracks, we're left with now a 2-lane highway, and one of those lanes has an exit ramp. And that exit ramp is at the 2.5-year period. So what does this mean and how you could advise the folks coming into your services, how you can advise your clients, for those of you that represent individual clients? Well, first of all, you have to be very careful as to how you monitor your intake process. That becomes key. Because if you anticipate an application for Medicaid home care being filed after October 1st, you have to ensure that there are no transfers of assets during the prior 2.5-year look back period. Okay, now that also remains an open item, which we will clarify once we get more clarification out of the Department of Health. You know, if you think about it, if I filed an application on September 30th and was under the old rules, I would have no look back. But if I filed an application on October 1st, the way the language in the budget is currently drafted, I'm now subject to that 2.5-year look back. That 1 day seems to be quite an inequity, doesn't it? You know, when the Deficit Reduction Act of 2006 came into play and we helped integrate that into the state of New York in a fair way, there was a phasing in of the look back and transfer penalties. Well, the budget bill does not account for that. So there's a clear discrepancy where someone at September 30th would not have a 2.5-year look back, but on October 1st, I would, right? So that is something we're going to seek further clarification from the New York State Department of Health on, because that is just not right. I can't possibly see them considering that inequity. So let's talk about what this look back now means, because many of you on this video conference do render home care services and may not necessarily understand what the nursing home transfer penalties are about. So let's just review that quickly. So first of all, let's pretend that you have a client that has a house worth $550,000. And that house was to be transferred either outright to somebody else or into a trust. And it was done. Well, under the pre-October 1st, 2020 rules, there's no effect. But post-October 1st, 2020, if you file that application after October 1st, here's how the calculation would be made. You would take the value of that asset, $550,000, you would divide it by the average regional rate, which in our area is $12,805, okay, the Northern Metropolitan rate. Those are published rates. If you just go to the Library of Official Documents, Medicaid documents, you'll see a GIS issued in January 2020 showing you the regional rates. That would result, that division results in a 42.95 month penalty period, meaning that your client is not going to be eligible for Medicaid home care services for 42.95 months. So the same analysis that applies for nursing home care is now going to apply to home care if there is this transfer of assets. But what does this also allow for us? It allows us to utilize the same planning opportunities that exist in nursing home cases for home care. So the first you always look for are those exempt transfers, transfers between spouses, transfers to a disabled child of any age. If you're dealing with a house, there's a caregiver child exemption, where if that child would render the level of care sufficient enough to keep that loved one at home, that parent at home, for 2 years immediately prior to institutionalization, then that could be considered an exempt caregiver child transfer. Same would apply then for home care services in that case. If you had a sibling that owned an equity interest in the home, that can also apply as an exempt transfer, as well as sole benefit trusts. So those opportunities that we have in a nursing home concept as exempt transfers will likewise apply in the home care context. We also, as we service our clients, we can continue to utilize other planning opportunities, such as promissory notes, annuities, things that can help keep our individuals at home, and yes, trigger a look back period, but carefully navigate through that period with the planning tools that I mentioned until the look back is then over and the person is fully covered. I'd be more than happy to answer your questions on that offline, so feel free to reach out with some thoughts as to how we do manage the crisis planning, as I call it, and how we'll apply it to the home care concept. So, monitoring your cases as they come in are critical. The time to act is now. It is before October 1st. Now, there are some open items. Open item number one, what about pooled income trusts? You know, in our neck of the woods here in New York, especially lower New York area, my clients cannot survive in the community unless they have access to their income. So as you know, Medicaid will allow you to have just over 800 bucks a month of exempt income. Any income over that is considered excess income, and it needs to be applied first towards the care of the individual before Medicaid would pick up. Well, what we tend to do is take that excess income and divert it to the pooled income trust, so that that pooled income trust can hold the income and pay any community bill, rent, utilities, property taxes that has that applicant's name on it. And that allows somebody to stay home. That's so consistent with the US Supreme Court case of Olmstead, which encourages home and community-based services versus institutionalization. So I've got to believe that the pooled trust will continue to survive post October 1st. Because if they don't, and they decide to apply the institutional budgeting versus the Medicaid home care community budgeting, it's going to force folks into institutions, which is directly contrary to what the Olmstead case is all about. And quite frankly, it's contrary to good human nature in caring for our society. So my opinion is I believe that the pooled trust will continue to operate as is, because we're dealing with community Medicaid budgeting and not institutional budgeting, which the individual will only be able to retain $50 a month of their income. So with that as a backdrop of what the budget bill proposed, I want to let you all know that I will continue these 15-minute education lunch series going forward. If there are any topics that you'd like to see me cover as well, whether we get into actual services, whether we get into planning opportunities, please feel free to reach out to us. Of course, info at amorusolaw.com. That's info at amorusolaw.com. Now, as you can tell, I'm not in my office right now. For some reason, the governor declared that we attorneys are not essential businesses, even though many of my clients have been affected by COVID-19. But I can tell you we are fully operational. We have all of our remote systems in place. We have the ability to sign documents electronically through virtual communication like we're doing today. And we could just counsel you as you help your clients, or we can counsel your clients directly. But as you have more time on your hands, I also invite you to go to our website, because I have a radio show that appears on the Peak every Sunday morning. It's called Elder Care on the Air. So if you go to eldercareontheair.com, click on the radio show tab, you'll see our shows for this season. And we highlight many assisted livings, home care agencies, accountants, caregiver children, really trying to help folks navigate the caring process. So if any of you would like to be a guest on that show, please reach out to us as well. This is, again, every Sunday morning, and it's on the Peak, 107.1 FM. But with that, I really do look forward to the series continuing. And remember, the time to act with the Medicaid home care planning is now. The key date is not transfers after October 1st. It's application filed after October 1st. So planning is to be done. It needs to be planned for, and the application filed before October 1st. And with that, our 15 minutes is up. I look forward to seeing you all next time. Thanks again. Be safe, be well, and know that we're with you all. Take care.